All right, guys, the 2023 Finals series got underway last night with the Pies taking down the Demons by 7 points. And I'm joined today by Joel Williams to have a chat about it and get his thoughts on the rest of the Finals series. Joel, how you going?
Yeah, good mate, digesting what happened last night. It was a cracking game of footy. I actually really enjoyed the match, despite being on the wrong side last night. In terms of how the scoreline finished, but yeah, it was a cracking game, and this time of year it always gives me a bit more of a tingle, throughout the regular season. It's kind of business as usual, and we get to the final series, and I start to just get a little bit antsy. So, really enjoyed the first night.
Yeah, I came in this morning, the blood was still pumping. I love the Thursday night footy as well. It's a great way to start. It just gets the weekend going, doesn't it?
I love it too, and it also gives Sunday off as well, which I enjoy. So you get the Thursday night, Friday night, and then the big Saturday, and then nice Sunday to digest it all and have the day off. So it's a good setup.
Yeah, it is a good setup. So we'll get straight into it. As you briefly mentioned, it was a good night for Tip Titans subs. I think we profited just over 5 units on props, thanks to a big night from Maxi Gawn. That was a very casual cover, 20 plus, halfway through the third. Quiet night from Pendles, and relatively quiet night from Tommy Mitchell. And a good profit. The one we missed on was we had Melbourne money line. You tipped them at maybe 202. They jumped at $1.85 the fair.
Yeah,
it's good betting.
Yeah, it's good betting, and not just on obviously the way the market moves and securing the value, but I thought, to be honest, the game signified it was the right bet, despite not getting the result. So I know Melbourne would be kicking themselves over last night, and I look at Collingwood and I just go, how do they continue to do it? To overcome the statistical numbers that we saw last night and still come away with a win seems like a steal, and they avoid the tough side of the draw, which is one I've been really talking a lot about.
Yeah. Well, let's touch on that quickly. I saw you send a tweet out last night that you said, the loser of that match obviously has to jump across to play likely Brisbane at the Gabba in a prelim.
Yeah.
After last night, you still think that's the case? They could,
Well, I think, so it's a really interesting scenario, because now you've got what was the tough side of the draw, in my opinion, gets tougher. So who's spewing about this result? I think Carlton and Sydney, because I wouldn't want to be playing Melbourne after last night. They were dominant. Gawn was scarily good, unstoppable. Collingwood threw 2 guys at him, they couldn't stop him, and now we find ourselves with a draw that, Carlton, I think they're tough, and I think they should get the job done against Sydney. If Sydney beat Carlton, well, far out, how far can they go? Then you got the Dees, and then obviously we probably think that Brisbane will get the job done at the Gabba. So who does this help? Well, I think it actually helps Brisbane in terms of winning the premiership, because they don't have to face Melbourne on grand final day. So if they get Melbourne, they get Melbourne on their home deck in a prelim final at the Gabba. Maybe their chances of making the grand final were lower, but if they get the job done, they get the Pies, who I still keep saying, I still think they're beatable.
They're beatable,
yeah.
Well, let me throw some stats at you quickly from last night. So Melbourne had 69 inside 50s, 23 shots on goal, 18 scores, and only registered 7 goals. So just before you get to the scores point of view, how many teams lose games? And by the way, the differential, I think, was about 32. I think it was 69 to 37 inside 50s. How many teams lose with those stats?
Very few. We might have seen it twice this season, and to win with only 37 inside 50s on the Pie side is unbelievable. Melbourne weren't just bad in front of goal, they were horrific. They were registering no scores, which should have been goals. In times where even a point would have been okay, in our last quarter. bringing it to a one-kick game, they just continued to miss it altogether, and it was diabolical in front of goal from the Demons' point of view. But I heard Simon Goodwin speak last night, and he was really positive because he thought they dominated three quarters of the game, and I definitely agree with that. So they've got a lot to take forward, but they find themselves with a long road home now.
Yeah, I think just 2 points that stood out for me is, I think it appeared to be that the lights were too bright for them. It's like they got jumped early. They didn't. I think Bobby Hill kicked the first 2 goals of the game.
Yeah.
And it just looked, the lights looked too bright early. That was sort of one point. Then after half time, then they were elite. Their pressure was elite.
Yeah.
And the road was just a bit too long to come back on. But I think the other thing that was concerning for me was they pride themselves on their defence. In the third quarter, at one point, I think it was about 5 minutes to go, Collingwood were 5 inside 50s for 4 goals.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
You can't.
No. And it's just the way Collingwood moved the football. Every one of their goals was usually in some way getting out the back. So they failed. I thought McRae, did an unbelievable coaching job, because how they managed to win the game, being dominated in such key areas, shows. Look, not many teams can win, obviously, with those statistical numbers. So the Pies, they're stars. They didn't have many stars. Josh Dacos, I thought it was one of his worst games of the year.
Yeah, he was quiet.
I didn't think Mitchell was that good. De Goey wasn't that good.
No.
So how do you win the game?
Yeah.
It's by system.
Yeah.
And, hats off to McRae there to still get the job done.
All right, well, great game, great opening game. I think we've probably covered that. We'll probably move on now. Let's start talking about tonight's game, Sydney-Carlton. Were you surprised at the selection table at all? I mean, there's supposed to be a bit of rain around Melbourne. They've gone with Pitnet. They're probably going to have the 2 rucks going. They had a bit of a selection squeeze. They had a lot of players coming back. Cripps was back. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's the right call. As we obviously say maybe around the ground, wet weather, can a ruck make a difference? But we're talking about multiple contests. Lots of contests. Pitnet's a good contest ruckman, so he brings that into the side, and I would say they'd have a plan similarly to Collingwood, where if it's not working for them, they'll probably use that guy as the sub to go out. So look, I wasn't too surprised. I'm really excited for this game. I know it's a huge game for the Blues. I'm looking forward to seeing if they can. There's a lot of pressure on them. Can they come in and deal with that pressure against a team who aren't at their best, haven't been at their best this year, but are seasoned, and they've played enough at the business end of the season, so they've got a lot more experience than Carlton, who only have one player playing tonight who's played a game of footy, finals footy at the Blues, so and that's Ed Kerner. So
well, that's going to be very interesting indeed. I do note, I think. So we took Sydney in the final round of the year against Melbourne. Melbourne played some very good footy to knock us off there. But I think the player that was missing for them was Papley. And I think getting him back, he's just been really good this year. I think he's going to make a difference. I side with you with Carlton, but Sydney were, obviously had a horrible start to the year, but they've got them together. And they're taking some decent form into the finals, which is important.
Yeah, no, they are. And Carlton's last round wasn't great. They had nothing to play for, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But it's going to be an interesting game, no doubt. And by no means is it penciling in a W for Carlton. So we don't have a play at the moment on that match in terms of a line, and we'll be staying out. I think about 12.5 is about right.
Okay. Cool. Now, the next game is the twilight, I think it is, on Saturday, between the Giants and the Saints. To me, this game's a bit like the middle child It's a bit forgotten in amongst all the Giants. No pun intended there. But do you have any thoughts on this game?
Look, yeah, I think it's going to be low scoring. It's going to be tight. I think a lot of people are on the Giants here. I'm not necessarily. I think Ross Lyon's a really great coach, and to give him 2 weeks planning, they'll have a really great game plan, a great system in place. The Giants aren't a great scoring team. I think their forward line is definitely beatable, and by a system defence on their home deck, I think St Kilda will be able to keep this game tight. Who wins? It's going to be tight, but I think when it is the forgotten middle child a little bit, because I think these are the 2 weakest teams in the finals. So whoever wins this, it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So they'll possibly, if what we think happens, Brisbane beat Port. Port will likely play, obviously the winner, but I'm leaning towards the Giants, so they'll play the Giants at Adelaide Oval, and that's a tough task as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Giants got absolutely smacked a few weeks ago by Port Adelaide here. So the loser of, Port Brisbane, by no means do they find themselves on a road like Melbourne do now, because they get, the winner of this game, which is the weakest game of the round, and then they, play Collingwood at the G. Which is a scary proposition, but still, as we saw last night,
beatable.
Beatable.
All right, and let's get into the final game of the opening round of finals. This is a cracker. Brisbane and Port. This obviously has big implications for one of your only futures pick. Obviously being Brisbane to win the flag. What do we see? This should be high paced. Lots of goals.
We took the over 168.5 on this. I think it's up near 175 now. So I think there will be a bit of scoring. The most potent offense in the league takes on Port, who actually aren't going too well defensively. So look, I'm bullish on the Lions. I've been pretty public about it for a while now, and I truly believe that this team is perfectly placed. And they're probably the only team in the final series right now that I don't see that has a weakness. So they're good in defence, they're good in the midfield, and they're good up front. Whereas teams like Melbourne, clearly up front, cost them again last night. So it's theirs to lose. It really is. It's the Brisbane Lions premiership to lose, and I think we got 650 about them when we sent them out to clients, and I've been backing them most of the year. So I'm hoping they can get the job done. However, whoever loses this game, by no means is their final series over.
It's a big statement there on the Lions. I think the odds will tell you that the Lions are pretty heavily favoured. I think in final series you really look for, you need big game players, don't you? And the Lions have them probably in all 3 parts of the ground, but one of their big ones is Charlie Cameron. Interesting stat I saw on him during the week was that he averages over 2 goals a game in finals, and I think he averages about 1.7 goals across his career in other games. So he really steps up in finals. He's like a Jimmy Butler, isn't he? Every team needs them this time of year.
The best sides usually have him, and I actually think it's the guys like Cam Rayner, Zach Bailey, Hugh McCluggage, who are continuing to elevate their game. And, it's been guys like Neil, who've been holding that midfield group up. He's had to cope with guys like Jared Lyons, who obviously didn't even make the cut this week, unfortunately for him. But, they're getting much more robust through the midfield, through the development of their other guys, and then obviously the inclusion of Dunkley. So I think, they've managed to improve where they perhaps needed to. And then, Cameron, Joe Danaher, I think, is coming into the final series with good form, same with Eric Hipwood.
He's looking good, isn't he?
Yeah, so it's a scary proposition. I actually really like Port as a side at the moment. I think they're good. They're in a good spot, but they just have the toughest matchup in footy this weekend.
If they do get to the granny, the narrative all week is going to be their record at the G.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably creating an opportunity that, like you say, they seem to be the most complete team out of any side in the comp at the moment, but you're still getting a decent price about them, and we still got exactly that a couple of weeks with the season to go. It's creating opportunity.
Well, and this is where, when we took the Lions pick at 650, we thought that, we're always open to backing other sides if value presents. But I'm not sure we're going to get that value on the opposite side of Brisbane now moving forward, because these factors that you're talking about are going to be overrated by the market.
Yeah.
When Brisbane were 4 goals up or something at 3/4 time and got overrun by the Demons recently, the MCG, I noticed a big learning. I think that's a big learning experience for the Lions. Almost that final hit that they learned from, and I've noticed from Fagan and some of their big guys like Neil talking throughout the week, it just seems they address things as they are. They're not hiding away from it. Do you know what I mean? And they tell it as they are. And I just sense a much more mature Brisbane Lions in the last 3 years, and that's the reason that I'm quite excited about them, because I don't think they make the same mistakes as what has haunted them for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Particularly at the G.
Yeah, and you're right. I listened to Lachie Neale because the media obviously bashes it up and makes it a big thing. And they asked Lachie Neale about it when they beat Collingwood at Etihad or whatever it's called these days, Marvel. And yeah, he was just like, I don't really know why. He was really casual about it. It was almost like they hadn't even really spoken about it within their 4 walls. It was just like, it's just another ground really. It's just, we don't really know why we can't win there. It's just but in saying that as well, they beat Melbourne at the G in last year's finals.
Yes,
series.
They did. And they were the better side when they lost to Melbourne a few weeks back. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm much less concerned about that than most of the public, I think. And that's why I think if Brisbane make it to the grand final, if they happen to, I think they'll likely be underrated on the day.
I was going to say, I can see, if we think Collingwood are going to get through, I can see them being underdogs on the day.
Yeah.
At least a goal or something like that.
Which you might see me go a little bit harder.
We might have to do another pod just before that one if that's the case. All right, that's the 4 games covered. Was there anything else you wanted to add? Anything you see happening, looking ahead, sort of to future weeks, or it's pretty good?
No, really well covered, and looking forward to the next 3. We had a good night last night, overall, which is good. So we'll look to keep that form rolling.
Yeah. Let's quickly touch on the Maynard incident. It's going to be a huge talking point this week, obviously. Yeah. What did you see?
Look, I'd love to see him get off, but I don't see how he does. If you're looking at how things have been interpreted this year, it's gone to another level where players have said, and even media have just said, look, he can't do anything there, but that's how we interpret things these days. He's probably got a couple of weeks. So there's been lots of scenarios like that. He left the ground to smother the football, but then turned his body and then hit him in the head with his shoulder, and the worst thing happened. Brayshaw was concussed.
Yeah.
And apparently Brayshaw was pretty cut up about what happened. He was really upset. Because he's got a history of concussion.
Yeah.
What's happened off the back of it is pretty bad. And I think that's what's just going to make it nearly impossible for Maynard to get off. Albeit, I feel for him because I think
it was pretty innocent.
It was. And, I love the way that, Braden takes the game on and plays his football. So I hope he gets off, but if you're asking what my opinion is, I think I hope he doesn't miss 2.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So, if he gets 1, then I think it's a happy medium we can all live with,
I think last year he gets off.
Yeah.
But this year, obviously, with the changing of, how that's being policed, I think he's in trouble.
There's just less room, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
I thought it was interesting how they asked him about it. They interviewed him after the game, and they asked him about it. He very diplomatically answered, "I don't really want to say it," but that's when they ask coaches about that stuff after the game, you never get anything out of them. I thought it was very interesting.
It was a bit forward, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
I thought he answered it really well.
He did, yeah.
He did. And Braden's a good, he wears his heart on his sleeve and he's a tough footballer, but he's a good person, and he played with Brayshaw.
Yeah.
And they're friends. They get along well. So there was
vision.
probably no malice there.
No, there was vision of him. He didn't leave the car.
Yeah,
he
would have felt pretty horrible about it.
He stood by the car the whole time until it left the ground. So, I tend to agree.
It'll be an interesting one to watch, that's for sure.
All right, nice. Now let's move on to another. I just wanted to cover one other topic. We were speaking about it during the week. The pre-finals bye. What do you think about it? What are you a fan?
I checked out.
Yeah, so did I.
I really did.
Because I didn't want it.
No,
I was loving it.
Yeah. It was. I believe that they should have it before the grand final because my belief is that form coming into finals should matter more. Teams timing their run. Getting their team health and form right, and it makes that round 24 game a little bit more important to take form into the finals because you're not having a week off. So I think that's a better scenario, and then you have the week off before the grand final where if anybody gets concussed or whatever, something that happens last night. Brayshaw misses a Grammy. So we need to avoid that at all costs, and so I would switch it to that point, and then like I told you, I checked out of AFL and didn't really, did our work, but didn't check back in from a mental and excitement perspective until yesterday. Until game day. It took that long. So
I was the same, and you forget about it, don't you? And especially that weekend, there's not much on. Had to switch over to the NRL. But that's what they do in the NFL. They have the week off before the Super Bowl. They play the Pro Bowl, and they have that weekend full of the skill events and things like that, which I know even over there that's sort of starting to fail a bit as well. The Pro Bowl isn't what it used to be, and it's they sort of don't take it too seriously now. What would you have on that weekend if we were to change it over? Would you try and sort of have maybe bring back the state game or something like that, or the only thing with that is then players are already on holidays. I think you would have to have something on that weekend in between.
Potentially.
You couldn't just have it.
I agree. I agree. And they used the week off just gone for the AFLW launch, which I think is really smart. I'm not sure if you could push that another 3 weeks or not. Probably potentially not. But you need to find something, don't you? But there's also more room for grand final build up, and that grand final week being, all the events that happen throughout there being a bit more spread out. I'll leave the filling stuff to the AFL, what to fill it with, but I'm just thinking from a match perspective and an AFL game perspective, it makes the most sense to me.
I mean, like you say, you leave it up to the AFL, but they're not going to make any decisions that aren't going to be commercially beneficial for them. So, we'll have to see what happens there. All right, let's move on to your performance this year. You've all but locked in another winning season for 2023. How have you seen this season in comparison to other seasons? Have there been as many spots available that you've been able to send the members? Are bookies getting sharper? What have you noticed?
I've really enjoyed it this season. It's great to get back on back to our best. Last season was a flat one. It was really important for me to dive in. I've been really engaged all season.
And I've been happy this year.
It's reflected in some great performance, which is rewarding because it's what we love to do. So, I've enjoyed it because I've been involved in every game, watching every game live. I've been doing a bit more live stuff. I've been, working alongside the Betfair exchange a bit more, which has allowed me to, get more spots on myself these days. And I think just that level of interest has helped our service and our members. And from a bookmaker perspective, I think not much has changed in terms of, we can only really rely on a couple of books to take some money on. So we don't even look at a large variety of them.
Yep.
They're pretty much only for big losing punters that lose, that bet not much and lose a high percentage. So, is the market getting sharper? It's a good question. What I'm finding is more people have an interest in AFL and betting AFL and getting smarter in betting AFL.
Yep.
So I'm seeing more early line movement.
Okay.
And I think that's just more people, even guys that are perhaps, starting their journey and becoming close to profitable or even break even. They're looking for any way they can get to a profitable point, and that is taking advantage of early lines. That is scalping markets more. So we're seeing some more movement early. We're seeing more talk about markets throughout the week, which I think is all healthy in the natural development of the sport. So, I really enjoyed the season, and there's still absolutely a lot of edge to be had, as we saw by the results.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of why I wanted to ask as well, because just personally, I see a lot, well, there's obviously a lot more bookies, full stop, but there seems to be a lot of markets, a lot of new markets as well, which, again, probably not taking a heap of money on. But the other thing I see is there seems to be more data than ever. There's more websites offering free data that you can access really easily, which is great for the sport.
Yeah.
It's great for turnover. It's only going to help, betting on the sport grow. Have you noticed that? Have you used any new sources of data this year? Found anything new?
There's some guys popping up and doing things, on Twitter and otherwise. Some guys starting out and are doing some interesting stuff, and they're just doing it because they love doing it and they're really interested in doing it. So these are the trailblazers that are going to continue to build the analytical side of the sport, which is awesome, because up until these people start to do these things publicly, Champion Data were the only person that was doing it. And guess what? The public can't get access to that information.
Right, yeah. Yep.
So how unfair is that? So I think it's fantastic that these, young people and people just starting out are really investing time and resource into, the analytical side of the game. And I think it's generating a lot more interest, and people enjoy talking about that. These days, when they're talking about sport, they like to talk about numbers. They like to talk about data, and I've really liked that side of development in the AFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of the game now, and we've seen it sort of in the NBA, haven't we? I mean, you certainly would have. I would assume that the more data available, the sharper these markets are going to become, and as we know, it's incredibly hard to beat, NBA match picks and totals and things like that, because there's so much data available. There's obviously still heaps of edge in props, but you would have to think that's the way the AFL is going to go with all these new sources becoming available. There's going to be more people using that data, and the markets are going to get sharper and harder to beat. Yeah,
I think they get sharper because more people have access to them, so more people have access to the sharper data and able to bet on the markets. But that's a better case than only Champion Data and their partners and things having access to the data, and the public being left on the outer. So the AFL is still a long way from the American sports, but it's great to see that we're bridging that gap.
I think what we'd love to see is we certainly saw last NBA season that the books were willing to back their lines in.
Yeah,
we'd love to see that in the AFL, wouldn't we? Just have some confidence in the lines you're putting up, and
it'd be fantastic. In the NBA, we would send our picks out and they'd hold. They'd take a lot of money. The AFL, certain books changed their strategy throughout the season. We saw some books were good at the beginning of the season. They decided they didn't want to take any money anymore.
Exactly.
and started shifting around. But it'd be great if at the end of the day, bettors want props now. They don't just want to bet on a team to win. They want to bet on their favourite player to have how many disposals. This guy to keep 2 goals. They want to have, they want to watch the game in a variety of ways. So the development has to be, bookmakers need to get better at pricing these markets so they can take more money on. Do you know what I mean? It's where it has to go. And while we're seeing the more markets come out, there's still a problem, isn't there, with these guys saying, hey, all right, we'll take you on for X amount, and some of the biggest bookmakers, are still not taking much.
No, and they're not actually bookmaking, they're just moving the fluck to an unbackable price.
That's right.
Yeah, all right. Good chat, mate. I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, who did you take in the better promotion last year for the AFL? It's come to that time of year.
Everyone got a new better account, took this.
Just one.
Everybody just one. I took the Brisbane Lions.
Oh, that's good. Will you be hedging?
I told you I was on them a long way out.
I couldn't remember. Yeah.
And Penrith.
Oh, wow.
So I'm in a good spot. I keep getting these text messages from them saying to cash out.
You haven't, have you?
I'm going in for the kill.
Nice. It's only $10, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, mate. Did you want to add anything else before we let you go?
No, not at all. I think it's been a great season. I hope Tip Titans clients have enjoyed it. We've enjoyed it a bit with Joel. I've enjoyed working with the Betfair Exchange this season as well, and I think it's been a great year, and we'll look to finish off strong and then into another sport we love, the NBA. So thanks everyone for their trust over this season, and we'll keep winning.
Nice, brilliant, mate. We might try and catch you possibly before the grand final.
Sounds good, mate.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.